Do you ever feel called to do something ridiculous? Half of it is inspired and half of it is completely unhinged. Let's talk thimbles. Thimbles are a super useful sewing tool. Many people use them, myself included. You usually wear them on your middle finger and they help prevent the back of the needle from pushing into your skin. And they let you use more force when you're sewing. I have 3 thimbles and not a single one actually fits perfectly. So rather than be boring and accept that the vestigial writer's bump I have from drawing and writing so much in high school and college means that a metal thimble will always fit a little strangely, I decided to solve the problem for myself by making a fully custom cast silver thimble modeled on my own actual hand. I mean, I told you it was a little unhinged, okay? I told you. Hold up though, I hear you saying from behind your computer screens. What are you even talking about? How can you make a silver thimble? I'm going to be using a technique called lost wax casting. When I was a kid, I thought it was called that because the technique was lost to time. I thought it was like an ancient technique of the Romans that we just don't know how to do anymore. That's why it was called lost wax casting. I was wrong. It's not that reason. First, you make a wax version of the final thing you're going to make. You sort of wrap that in an investment or a mold. You burn out the actual wax, and then a hole is left in the shape of the wax. And that hole is where the liquid metal, be it bronze or silver, is poured into. So it's called lost wax because the wax is literally lost. You no longer have that original sculpture you made. It's gone. And you just sort of hope that the metal one is good. Because you can't do it again. You've lost it. The wax is gone. I can't say that enough. The wax is gone. So that's the theory. Let's see what actually happened. Since the objective was to create a wax thimble, I needed a fake finger to work on. My own hand is very inconveniently made out of like flesh and blood and squishy sensitive bits. And I need a finger that I could dip in hot wax or hold at various angles and even put in the freezer sometimes. And I did not volunteer my own human finger for this experiment. I first attempted to do this with just stuff from the hardware store. I even made a fairly serviceable plaster of Paris finger. I started building up wax on it and making the wax thimble, and I was feeling pretty pleased with myself, but in the end, the plaster finger just couldn't hold up to the intensity of what I was doing with it. It broke, and I had to actually scrap the entire thing and start over. I still wanted to include this in the video though, because it's an important part of making things and learning new art forms. You're gonna mess up. The first things you try are probably gonna suck, but you just gotta learn and try again. I started fresh using proper crafting silicone, and I created a new mold of my finger, and I used resin to create the finger itself. Resin is a hard plastic after it cures, and it's way hardier, but it's also less safe to use. So if you do use resin, make sure you pay attention to the directions and the safety instructions. I ended up pouring the resin itself outside to make sure I was in a ventilated area. I built the wax thimble at the makerspace that I'm a part of using jewelry making supplies. Jewelers also use lost wax casting, so a lot of the tools are perfectly applicable. I used some pre-formed waxed sheets to create the base layer of the thimble, and I sort of pressed it against the resin finger mold to sort of create the initial shape. The tools I'm using are basically dental tools, but I heat them up in a candle flame to make them hot enough to actually melt and work with the wax. And once I have a defined starting shape, I mostly am just using simple candle wax to sort of build it out and create the actual look of the thimble itself. As astute as you are, dear watcher, I'm sure you've noticed that this does not look like a regular thimble, because I was thinking to myself as I was designing and planning and making this project, why would I make a regular thimble when I can make a creepy, sort of uncanny valley thimble instead? Like, why would I be normal? And so the plan to make it look like my actual fingertip was born, and I have zero regrets. For better or for worse, the wax sheet was pink, and the flame oxidizes the tools and adds soot, so the wax thimble doesn't look particularly nice, shall we say. In fact, it looks kind of gross. But luckily, we don't care about the color of the thimble. We only care about the shape. The wax is going to be completely destroyed by the process of doing this, after all, so the only thing we care about is literally the form. The process of making the thimble also gave me an opportunity to really study and understand how thimbles work. We think of them as really simple shapes, and they are, but they have little features that we can easily overlook that have really important aspects to them. One of those features is the little lip at the bottom of the thimble. You've probably noticed it on a thimble that you've used. It turns out this is not just aesthetic. It's to prevent the needle from slipping backwards if you lose control of it. The lip catches it like a little stop and prevents it from potentially jamming backwards into your hand. I want to make sure I included that safety feature in my thimble, so I'm using a pre-made strip of jeweler's wax to build that in. The other thing thimbles have are those little divots all around the tip of the thimble. Just like before, this is not wholly aesthetic. The dots act as little rests for the needle and help the needle from slipping. To create the divots in my wax thimble, I use, again, kind of a dental tool. It's basically a little dotting tool. I heat it up in the candle flame and I sort of press it into the top layer of the wax. I want to make sure I don't go all the way through because I don't want a hole after all, I just want a divot. With the thimble all done, it's time to connect the dots, so to speak. Again, this is going to be destroyed, but we need a way for the silver to reach it. And that path is called a sprue. So the long strands of wax I'm adding here are called sprues. Remember, everything that is wax will eventually become a wax-shaped hole. So these channels I'm creating will be channels for the liquid silver to flow through in order to reach the thimble. And the plastic plate I'm holding in my hand with the little hole is going to be the top. The plastic plate will come off, but the hole will remain. The mold is made out of a material called investment. It's got a lot of powdered silica dust in it, which is extremely bad to breathe and is carcinogenic. So my friend Sigra is doing some of the close-up work with it since she had a better mask than me. And she held my hand through this project, and I am super thankful for her.
I can't hear myself with the sub, so I'm sure you guys can't really hear me.
I can hear you. You're doing fantastic. Thanks for doing all the work.
Oh, no problem. I always just kind of do it by vibes. Like, if it's the right consistency, it will work. As long as you're, you know, kind of on the right.
The investment powder is mixed with water until it's the right consistency, and apparently this is mostly just vibes-based. Sigrid just added water until it, quote-unquote, felt right. I didn't question the process too much. I deferred to her expertise almost completely.
And make sure you get it all the way up to the top so there's enough. Because the top will end up being the bottom.
Right. The mixture is then poured over the thimble in the can and left to dry overnight because it needs to be completely 100% dry. The next day we came back to the makerspace and got to work on what's called the burnout. Right now the wax is still inside the mold. We don't want that. We want a hole to be where the wax is. So we need to burn it out. And when I say burn it out, I don't mean melt it. I mean evaporate it. I mean burn it so completely that it is gone. This takes several hours in a kiln at very, very hot temperatures, and there's a schedule for ramping it up and down, so eventually the mold is at the correct temperature to be used in casting. These little grains are what I'll be using to cast the thimble with. This is actually sterling silver, and the fact that it's grains makes it much easier to melt consistently, but even though it looks like little grains of sand, it is absolutely sterling silver. I grab it. When the mold is finally ready, it's time to set up for casting. The makerspace has a centrifugal casting machine, which is super neat, and I really liked using it. You wind it up, which we did off screen, and then you load your mold into the back of it. Our footage here is kind of mediocre, because, well, you kind of had one shot at it, and it is what it is. Alright. Now we begin. Just keep cooking. Good luck, little buddy. I'm so excited for you and your new life together as one mass instead of all these little masses. You're gonna do so good. The crucible where you heat up the metal is connected to the mold on the back, and eventually it will get sucked through the crucible into the mold. The torch we had for this was a little underpowered. There's actually a heftier torch now at the makerspace than what we had at the time. I think I had to stand there for about 20 minutes, sort of massaging the flame over the silver in order to get it liquefied at the same rate everywhere. Start filming, Eli?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. Rolling.
Okay, everybody. Say your prayers and whatever.
But the real magic happens now.
You can probably take it off now. Wait, I'm gonna stand back.
Ready? I pull the heat, Sigrid pulls the pin on the centrifugal casting machine, and then it starts to whip around. The force sucks the liquid silver through the hole in the back of the crucible and into the hole of the mold, and sucks it directly into where we hope it will fill the silver thimble mold.
Yep, so we're gonna cool her.
Give her a little time. Yeah.
And then in like 10 minutes, it looks like I got the button on there.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
We got the right amount of silver then. Once it's cooled enough, we dump it into a big vat of water and we dig for gold. Or, well, we dig for silver.
You can even, if you want, I can like grab that.
Until right now, we have no idea whether or not this worked. All of this time, all of this work could have been for nothing. At any point, the mold could have failed, the silver could have not run into the mold correctly. There's just like a myriad of possibilities where this doesn't work. Welcome to making things!
Yes, it's a lot more arduous than you think it is.
The YouTube videos make it look so, so
Right?
easy.
This is a
Just
4-second
outtake.
clip.
Right? They can do it in 4 seconds.
Wait.
Oh my god, there it is. She's
Oh my
beautiful.
god. It looks like a fucking finger thimble. Alright, I gotta get all the shit out of it. But yeah, this looks,
Did it turn out?
yeah, it looks really fucking good. But it does work. In fact, it works almost completely perfectly. And it's so cool. But that's not the end of the story. The raw silver thimble needs to be cleaned up and refined. I cut off the sprue and the plug sections, which I can melt and reuse. That silver is not actually lost. And I refine the actual thimble until it looks good. This is one of those things where you feel like you should be done. You cast the thimble. You did the magic part. You made the thing. But this part is actually what makes the object or the garment or the sculpture or the painting really, really good instead of just finished. This is worth the time it takes. One thing that did not survive the casting process was the divots on the pad of the thimble. They are visually different, but they don't do what they need to do. They don't actually catch the butt of a needle. So I bought some small jewelry making ball burrs and I drilled out the holes. This was actually more time consuming than I anticipated. I spent probably 4 hours in the process of making these divots functional. A little polish and it looks amazing. So it was a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of learning, but I am so glad I went down this rabbit hole. It was so much fun, and I now know about lost wax casting, and I had no idea how to do that before, so that was darn cool. But not only that, I have a custom thimble made to look and be exactly like my actual fingertip. And it's a useful item that is also aesthetically magical, and like that's something that is undervalued, I think, is having something that is not only beautiful but functional. And yeah, I made this. I made it. I'm really proud of this one. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you stay to the end, you don't get a prize, but thanks. And yeah, life is short. Go out there and make weird stuff. Be ridiculous. Okay. Be queer and make stuff. Bye! Oh, we have to let the plane go by. Is there another freaking plane?